All right, so let's dive into some seriously mind-bending stuff today. You're prepping for this big philosophy debate, right? And you're wrestling with this question of like, how do we know anything for sure?
Hmm.
Even something as simple as like, where are your fingers right now?
Right.
You see them, you feel them,
Yeah.
but how does that like actually become knowledge?
Well, it's a question that's, fascinated philosophers and scientists for centuries.
Yeah.
I mean, we often take knowledge for granted, but the process of like going from sensory input
Yeah.
to actually understanding something
Hmm.
is incredibly complex.
Exactly. And to kind of get a handle on this, we've got like a whole stack of sources here.
Yeah.
Articles on how memory works, some classic thought experiments from the philosophy world, even a video that uses this crazy tongue illusion to show how easily our senses can be tricked.
Oh yeah, that tongue illusion.
Yeah. Have you seen that one?
It's a great example of how our perception can be totally unreliable.
Oh, yeah.
It highlights that gap between our raw experience and what we actually know.
Okay. So how do we like bridge that gap then?
Well, that's where epistemology comes in.
Okay.
Basically, this study of knowledge.
Yeah. Our sources touch on that a bit.
Yeah. And one fundamental distinction in epistemology is like between knowing something by definition and knowing something through experience.
Okay.
Like all bachelors are unmarried.
Right.
That's true by definition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regardless of whether you've ever like met a bachelor in your life.
Right.
But knowing that your fingers are right there,
Yeah.
that requires sensory input.
So you're saying like some things we know just by understanding the words themselves, and others require us to actually interact with the world.
Exactly. And that leads us to the next layer of the question, which
Yeah.
is, where does this knowledge actually live in the brain?
Right.
What are memories made of?
Now this is where it gets really fascinating.
Yeah.
Our sources suggest it's not as simple as, having a memory file like tucked away in our gray matter somewhere.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
The current understanding is that memories aren't localized to specific spots.
Okay.
They're spread across vast networks of neurons
Huh.
throughout the brain.
So more like a web of connections than a filing cabinet.
Precisely imagine like a path through the woods.
Okay.
The more you walk it, the clearer and more defined it becomes.
Right.
That's similar to what happens in the brain. Repeated stimulation strengthens those connections between neurons.
Okay.
And this process is known as long-term potentiation, or LTP.
LTP.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I were to like use a debate technique over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
the neural pathways associated with it would get stronger,
Exactly.
making it easier to recall and use in the future.
Exactly. That's just one tiny example of how this complex process of LTP underpins our ability to learn and remember.
That makes you wonder about the sheer volume of information our brains handle. I mean,
Mhm.
how much can we actually store?
It's astounding. Research estimates the brain's storage capacity to be around 2.5 petabytes.
What?
To put that in perspective, that's enough to store like 300 years of continuous TV recording.
That's a lot of TV.
Yeah.
It makes you appreciate the complexity of what's happening inside our skulls.
For sure.
But here's the thing. If our knowledge is built on these like intricate brain processes and our senses,
Right.
how can we be sure we're experiencing objective reality?
Yeah.
What if our senses are misleading us?
Ah, yes, the age-old question.
Yeah,
How do we know what we know is actually true?
right.
After all, for centuries, people believed that the sun revolved around the earth.
Right.
What if our current understanding of the world is just as flawed?
It's a bit unsettling to think about, isn't it?
It is.
This idea that everything we know is filtered through our individual brains. Like, we
Right.
can't step outside our own minds to get a truly objective view.
This is what philosophers call the egocentric predicament.
Okay.
It raises the question of whether we can ever truly escape the confines of our own perceptions and access objective truth.
Whoa. So are we like stuck then doomed to forever wander around in our own little subjective realities?
Well, there's a philosophical position called solipsism,
Okay.
which argues that only one's own mind is certain to exist.
Right.
It suggests that everything else, like the external world, other people,
Yeah.
could all be figments of our imagination.
Okay.
And logically is pretty hard to like disprove.
Okay. That's both fascinating and kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that lead to a pretty bleak existence?
Mm-hmm.
If you truly believed that nothing existed outside your own mind,
Right.
what motivation would you have to connect with others or engage with the world?
That's one of the criticisms of solipsism.
Okay.
While it's an interesting thought experiment, it doesn't really offer a practical or fulfilling way to live.
Right.
Most people find realism,
Okay.
the belief that the world exists independently of our minds,
Right.
to be a much healthier approach.
Yeah. Realism makes more sense to me, too.
Yeah.
It's reassuring to think that, like, trees would still be trees.
Yeah,
And my coffee would still be delicious even if I wasn't here to experience them.
exactly.
But even if we lean towards realism, we still can't definitively prove it right.
That's the challenge. There's always an element of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Even with all our scientific advancements and philosophical pondering,
Hmm.
we may never have absolute, irrefutable proof of objective reality.
That brings us back to our original question, though.
Yeah.
If we can't be certain about anything,
Right.
does that mean the pursuit of knowledge is pointless?
Not at all.
Okay.
It's like that story about Martin Gardner and the cat.
Oh, right.
Remember that from the source material?
Yeah, he was a mathematician and science writer who
Yeah.
used a really clever analogy.
Hmm.
Something about a cat playing with a keyboard.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Gardner argued that just like a cat batting at keys without understanding the complexities of a keyboard,
Yeah.
we humans are fascinated by the universe.
Okay.
Even though we may never fully grasp its mysteries, we explore, we experiment, we try to make sense of it all, even if we can't achieve absolute certainty.
So it's more about the journey of discovery
Uh,
than reaching a final destination.
Precisely, the pursuit of knowledge drives us to learn to grow, to expand our understanding of ourselves and the world.
Right.
And even if our knowledge is always evolving and being refined, that process itself is incredibly enriching.
That's a really helpful perspective, especially as I'm like prepping for this debate.
Yeah,
It's easy to get caught up in trying to win the argument.
right.
But maybe a more effective approach is to acknowledge that I don't have all the answers.
Absolutely. In fact, acknowledging the limits of your own knowledge can actually make you a more persuasive debater.
Really?
It shows intellectual humility, a willingness to learn from others, and a genuine interest in understanding different perspectives.
That makes a lot of sense. Instead of just trying to like bulldoze my opponent with facts,
Mm-hmm.
I can approach the debate as an opportunity to learn and grow.
Exactly.
But isn't acknowledging uncertainty a weakness in a debate?
Hmm.
Well, people see it as a lack of conviction.
Not necessarily. In fact, being open about the limitations of your knowledge can demonstrate a deeper understanding of the complexities of the issue.
Okay.
It shows you're not afraid to grapple with nuanced ideas and that you're willing to consider different viewpoints.
Right.
This can make you appear more trustworthy and credible to your audience.
So rather than trying to appear all-knowing,
Yeah,
I should embrace the fact that there are things I don't know and use that as a starting point for genuine dialogue.
exactly. It's a much more engaging and ultimately more productive approach.
Okay.
And it brings us to another crucial point. If all we can truly know for sure is our own experience, how does that shape our interactions with others?
That's an intriguing question, especially in today's world where it seems like people are more divided than ever.
Yeah.
If we all acknowledge that our own perspective is just one piece of the puzzle, what would that mean for how we communicate and relate to one another?
Yeah, it makes me wonder if, like, acknowledging the limits of our own perspectives could actually, like, bring us closer together.
It's definitely possible. If we approach conversations with a sense of curiosity rather than judgment,
Okay.
we might be more willing to listen to each other's experiences and try to understand where they're coming from, even if we don't agree.
Yeah, that reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, this idea that the pursuit of knowledge is about more than just accumulating facts. It's about developing a deeper understanding of ourselves and our relationships with others.
Exactly. And that's especially relevant when you consider that everything we know is ultimately filtered through our own unique experiences and perceptions.
So does that mean we should be, like, skeptical of everything we think we know?
Not necessarily skeptical, but perhaps a bit more humble.
Okay.
Recognizing that our perspective is limited can encourage us to be more open to new information, to challenge our own biases, and to engage with the world in a way that is both curious and compassionate. Okay, I'm starting to see how all these ideas connect. It's not just about knowing stuff. It's about how we approach knowledge, how we interact with others, and how we make sense of the world around us.
Well said. And I think that's a valuable insight to take with you as you prepare for your debate.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, it's not about proving you're right. It's about engaging in a thoughtful exchange of ideas.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. I'm feeling much more confident about approaching the debate with a sense of curiosity and open-mindedness rather than just trying to win.
That's the spirit. And remember, even though we've covered a lot of ground today, this is really just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
The exploration of knowledge is a lifelong journey.
Speaking of journeys, you mentioned you had a specific takeaway you wanted to highlight for our listener, something they could apply to their debate prep based on everything we've discussed.
Yes, absolutely. Since your debate revolves around knowledge and how we acquire it, you could use the concept of the egocentric predicament to your advantage by acknowledging that every argument, every piece of evidence presented is inevitably filtered through the lens of individual perception.
Right.
You can use this to highlight the importance of considering multiple perspectives and challenging assumptions.
That's brilliant. I could even use the cat analogy to illustrate the point.
Hmm.
Just like Gardner's cat playing with the keyboard, we're all exploring the vast universe of knowledge, and none of us have the complete picture.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to emphasize the need for intellectual humility and open-mindedness,
Hmm?
which, as we've discussed, can make you a more effective communicator and debater.
I'm so glad we had a chance to really dive deep into this. It's given me a whole new perspective on not just the debate itself, but also on how I approach learning and interacting with the world in general.
That's what we'd love to hear. Remember, the show notes have links to all the sources we talked about today, plus some bonus resources if you want to keep exploring these ideas further.
So until next time, keep those synapses firing.
Hmm.
Embrace the mysteries of the universe and never stop questioning everything.